welcome to Power Art Projects, empowering artists to speak their truth. Power Art Projects is a platform for art writing, presentation, and curation. I explore the artists' processes and their artworks. Power Art Projects assists artists with professional art writing, proofreading, and editing. My name is Kim Power, aka Cap Kapow, and I have been an art writer, presenter, and curator in New York City since 2015. Today I will be speaking with artist Michelle Condrat. Michelle paints luminous and colorful landscapes that excite the eye and stimulate the senses. She is a native of Utah and has lived there almost her entire life. After earning her art and art history degrees from the University of Utah in 2007, she continued on her artistic journey, painting the unique landscape of Utah and the Southwest. Michelle recently had a solo show entitled No Ordinary World at Abend Gallery in April. Sadly, the exhibition had to be moved online because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we will be looking at some of those works today. Michelle, welcome to Power Art Projects.
Good, thanks, Kim.
I'm talking to you from my studio in the Bronx. You have a show in Colorado and Denver, and you're in Utah, right?
Yep.
So what part of Utah are you in?
Salt Lake City area.
Okay, so I don't know anything about Salt Lake City. Is it anything like the big metropolis that New York is, or what is Salt Lake City like?
Well, I've never been to New York, but I know it's a lot smaller than that.
Okay.
It is the capital. It's a big valley, and it's really close to the mountains, and it's pretty much close to everything that you need to go to. But it's definitely not as big as New York, but it's growing for sure.
Yeah, I think I remember when I was a kid, I went skiing somewhere around there. So I know there's a lot of wonderful skiing.
Yeah, there's a lot of ski resorts about like 20 minutes away, so.
Amazing. You studied art and art history at the University of Utah. So did the art history degree inform your work as well?
It did. I mean, we had to take a big variety of art history classes, so that was actually kind of nice.
Like a certain period that you were interested in when you were studying art history?
I actually really liked I took an American landscape art class, and I really liked that because I already liked some of the artists, like Albert Bierstadt, stuff like that. So that was actually probably my most interesting class. Probably my hardest one was Italian Renaissance. That was pretty brutal.
And so you had this show at Abend, and I think we've talked about this, that the show had to go online. How long were you working towards that show again?
Well, the show was in the works for about a couple years, so I knew I was going to do the show in April of 2020. But I started on those paintings like way back in Christmas time, so pretty much since Christmas until April, I was working on those paintings. Just a lot of it was they were bigger sizes, and I wanted to get enough pieces for the show, so it took me a few months actually.
Oh wow, that's intense. A lot of very focused working, I'm sure.
Yeah, I cleared my whole schedule, so I only worked on those paintings for all those months. So.
Oh, wow, amazing. You were totally immersed in these huge landscapes. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at a few of them. So tell me about this painting, Discovery. It's really so warm and inviting, and it kind of reminds me of everybody brings their own experience to an artwork, and I used to hang out in the woods in Indiana when I was a kid. So it reminds me of like fall in Indiana with all those leaves covering the ground. What were you thinking about when you were creating this one?
So this painting and my other painting, Off the Beaten Path, they actually go together. You can't really tell by the images, but they're actually of the same place. And you really wouldn't know this, but they're actually down in Zion National Park. So,
Oh,
I mean, like you can't tell because there's no red rock, there's no canyon or anything, but I was just focusing on the trees. And so what happened was I was doing this really popular hike in Zion. It's called the Temple of Sinawava, and this hike is the one that leads to the Narrows, the slot canyons that everyone kind of has seen pictures of.
oh, see, I
And
haven't. I don't know anything about it, so maybe you could explain that a little bit.
oh, yeah, so the Narrows, it's a slot canyon, so it has water running through it, and then on both sides you have like these towering rock, like just rock walls around you.
Oh,
So it's a
wow.
really popular hike because people like to walk through the water, and it's really, really pretty. Um, it's also where they have a lot of flash flooding, so you have to be really careful when you go through these slot canyons,
Oh,
especially in spring because the water is really high and cold. But so it's a really popular hike. So I was on this trail that leads to the Narrows, and there was like a ton of tourists around. I'm kind of like walking like cattle, you know, with all these other tourists. It's really slow. And so
uh-huh.
finally there was like this break in the crowd and no one was really around. So I kind of hopped off the trail, which you're kind of not supposed to do.
Oh,
But I got off the trail and I kind of went up over this ridge. And that's when I came into this grove of trees. And that's where this painting, Discovery and Unbeaten Path was. That's where I got those images from. And it was really great. I just kind of like emerged into this grove of trees and I saw all these autumn colors because it was in November and that's when all the trees and the colors were changing. And it
okay.
was just so pretty. And so that's why I titled this one Discovery, because it was just a really nice discovery. And the other one I titled Unbeaten Path just because I kind of jumped off that main trail
Yeah, I'm going to
and
go over to it to take a look. Oh, off the beaten path. Right. Okay. So this
yeah,
is like where you entered it?
yeah. So it's the same place, but just kind of different angles. But you can tell it's kind of the same just based on the colors and of the leaves. And
Mm-hmm.
they're my two largest paintings too, and I kind of wanted those to kind of go together.
How big are they?
They're both 36 by 60.
Oh, wow. And so is that the Narrows build right behind it or the
Yeah,
Red Rock?
yeah, the Red Rock. Yeah, so I'm not quite to the Narrows. It's kind of leading up that way, but it is the Rock Canyon in the background.
Okay. The light is amazing that you've put in there. It seems it's a little bit like your morning light paintings. Um,
Yeah, you know what's so neat about being in Zion that time of year? Like I said, it's in November, so it's later in the year, so the sun is so low in the sky that when it comes up the canyon,
oh.
it makes such amazing lighting in the canyon. And and it's like my favorite time of the year to be down in that park. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, and it just kind of shines up through the canyon, so you get like these great, you know, the leaves will glow, and when it hits the rock too, it just makes everything really more dramatic.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That sounds just gorgeous. You know, we get fall here, but nothing like what you're getting with the colors that you get. We get some orange and other and yellows, but nothing like the intensity that you are seeing there. And obviously, you're really taking advantage of it in your paintings and maybe exaggerating it a little bit. But I have seen some beautiful falls that in up near Boston that have colors like that for sure, and in the
Oh,
Shenandoah Valley.
yeah. And you guys kind of have like, you guys have a lot of maples up that way, or is that more north? That might be a little
I think that might be more north. I'm not
Vermont.
particularly sure about what trees are indigenous to this area in the Bronx, although I should because I paint them all the time. But I don't recall seeing a lot of maples, at least in my neighborhood.
Oh,
There might be more up north.
yeah,
But
probably the New England area, I think.
yeah, I think so too. And those colors can be really wonderful and intense up there too. For some reason, just this year, in the last few years, the colors just haven't been, you know, really intense. And I do miss those intense colors. So it's wonderful to visit that through your paintings.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So tell me about, I think we had spoken about like what time of day is most advantageous to make your paintings. It seems like you've got different morning paintings in there, but I know that you've told me that you weren't a morning person necessarily.
No.
So what is another one that you would say was like really the best time of day for you?
So the other one I wanted to talk about was Winter Journey.
Okay, Winter Journey. Let's see.
The one with the road.
Oh, it must be further on. And we get a chance to look through all your beautiful paintings along the way. Let's see. There we go.
Yep.
Oh. So is that a I've done cross-country skiing. Is that a cross-country skiing path?
You probably could have on that day. Yeah, this is so this is actually one of the few winter scenes that I've painted. Like, I don't really paint a lot of winter scenes or snow, mostly because I don't really get out in the winter to take a lot of photos.
Okay.
But this one, so this is up a canyon that's pretty close to Salt Lake City. It's so maybe like 15 minutes away, maybe 20 minutes away, and it's called Mill Creek Canyon.
Okay.
And I just happened to be on a walk with my boyfriend this day, and it was right after a big snowstorm. So the night before we had a big snowstorm, and then this day was like one of those perfectly clear, crisp days with the sun shining. And what I really liked about this image is, you know, we talked about how when I'm in nature, I like to be out there with no one around. I like things really untouched by humans.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt like this scene was like that because no one had been on the snow yet. You know, there were no footprints.
Right, I was going to say no footprints.
Yeah, there's no sign of humans, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of timed it out where it was like this untouched, you know, pure snow. And that's what I really look for when I'm out in nature. And, you know, when I paint, I said I don't really add human touches. I generally don't add stuff like that, like fences, telephone poles. I do have it in one of the other paintings, but that's pretty rare for my work.
Okay.
And so I really liked this scene. And what's kind of neat is some people have seen this painting and they know exactly where it is. They're like, oh yeah, I walk up that canyon all the time. So that was kind of nice to hear that I was able to capture it close enough that people recognized it too.
Oh yeah, that's great that people could tell exactly where it was. That's amazing. And so what is that mountain in the distance there that I'm looking at, the peak?
I'm not exactly sure what it's called. I don't know if it has an actual name.
Okay.
And the crazy thing about this too was Mill Creek Canyon is such a popular place for people to walk and hike, and of all days, I think it was because there was so much snow, of all days, like no one was there, and it was really great. I still remember that walk.
You really captured like the crispness and clearness of a winter's day just after the snow has fallen. I can feel it for sure.
Yeah. And you know, what's also challenging about the snow is there's so many color, like subtle color changes in it that, you know, it's not just white. You have purples and greens and blues, and so it's kind of challenging to try and capture that.
Yeah, and this is different from your other paintings. It doesn't have those hot colors that you tend to use, and so it's kind of interesting that it's a little toned down, but then you have those beautiful, beautiful blues and purples down there in the snow. It's just, yeah, it just feels like this wonderful discovery, like you're heading off into this path and you're the first person to walk there.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. And like the path kind of goes off into the distance, so you know it kind of draws the viewer in, and it's like, you know, where am I going? And that's why I titled it Winter Journey, because you know it's kind of, you don't know what's going to be around the corner, but you're just going along with the ride, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels very peaceful and very meditated. That's wonderful. Do you work in, I'm trying to picture this. So do you usually work in series? How do you work? So you're 5 hours a day and you're talking about like not getting burnt out. Do you work on several paintings at a time? Do you work on a series? What do you do?
Yeah, I always work on multiple pieces. I never just focus on one painting unless it's really big and I can work on it for that many hours in a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I always have a lot going on, and I kind of rotate through them because some of them need to dry too, and then I can work on one and wait for that one to dry, and then I kind of go back on, like, rotate through them.
Okay.
So usually it's like a project. Like if I have to get a gallery 5 paintings, I start all 5 of them and I work on them pretty much
Oh,
all at once, which is
okay.
why it's hard when people ask, how long does it take to finish this painting? I'm like, I don't know. I kind of work on a lot at once, you know?
That makes sense. So if you were working on 5 at a time, like when would those 5 be ready from start to finish?
It would depend on the size. If they were like
Yeah.
medium to kind of larger paintings, it could take 3 weeks to four
Okay.
weeks,
Okay.
depending on
Interesting.
dry time. It's usually the drying time that takes the longest for me.
You're working in oils, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, are you doing any kind of underpainting or is it all alla prima? What is happening there? What's your
Um,
process for?
well, it's funny because people think, do you start with the squares, in your paintings? And honestly, I start my paintings just like everyone else. I do an underpainting. I kind of sketch it out really loose.
Hmm.
Then I start with the general colors, block block them all in, and I
Hmm.
slowly work my way toward detail.
Okay.
So even my brushes start bigger, and then they start getting smaller and smaller,
Hmm.
and then I start kind of doing my signature line work
Okay.
toward.
Okay, that's cool. And so are you working in with glazes or are you on a dead layer or not? You're just working with color from the beginning.
Yeah, straight up color. I
Okay.
just throw the color on. Pretty much the first layer is full on color.
Okay.
At the very end, I will do some washes on it. So I do that for like the backgrounds and try to get that depth,
Okay.
which is hard to do plein air because they're too wet to do that. But I definitely do that with my studio work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to hear more about like the difference between your plein air work and your studio work. I guess one of the things I was wondering, first of all, is like where do you find your inspiration? Do you take walks and look for places that you want to paint, or are there places that you're inventing in your head? You also said that you work from Photoshop. Are you inventing the landscape a little bit too? How does that work for you?
So all my reference material is from places that I've been, and I only work. I try to only work from my own photographs. Like I don't go on the internet and use other people's work. Um, so even from the very beginning, when I take the picture, I'm trying to capture the composition and the lighting from the very start. And
Okay.
it's what I see. I'll see something, and it might just be going for a walk, and it's like, I love that tree and the lighting, so I'll take a picture of it. A
Okay.
lot of my work is from my plein air events, so
Okay.
a lot of my reference material is of the Grand Canyon and of Zion, but also from where I live, like Utah is so beautiful. I can go up to the mountains in like 20 minutes, so
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
yeah, it's a great place to live for landscapes for sure. So
Oh, great. I've never seen Utah. Tell me a little bit about the landscape there. What is it like? I mean, I see what it's like in your paintings, but maybe you can describe it in words what
yeah.
it's like.
Well, what's so unique about Utah is you can go from like snowy pine tree covered mountains to flat out desert and red rock, and it's all in the same state. That's what's really unique about Utah. And
Wow.
so you get everything. You could have lakes, you can have mountains, trees. I mean, we're known for we have the greatest snow on earth. That's like on our license plate. You know, we have
Oh,
skiing and everything. But you could drive like 4.5 hours and you're in straight up desert and Red Rock, Zion National Park, Bryce Canyon. And so it's really unique here. It's not like anywhere else.
wow. Wow. And you said that you can get to those places really quick. It sounds like you do get outdoors a lot. Do you do like a lot of, I mean, I know in the beginning I was talking about how you do hiking and fishing. Have you always been like an outdoors person, and how extensive is that for you? Are you camping out there for days? Are you hiking for hours? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I camped and hiked and fished since I was a little kid. I'd go out with my dad. He works for the Forest Service, so he's always been kind of an outdoors guy.
Hey,
But I don't get out as much as I used to. I guess I'm just busier, you know how that is.
in the
So
studio. Yeah.
yeah, so it's more day trips, and it's more of my plein air events is when I actually spend a lot of quality time outside. And that's why I kind of have to rely more on the photographs and my photo references.
Okay. So when you're at these plein air events, you're taking a lot of photos as you're working too, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I'll be painting and then it's like, get the camera out and then you'll paint some more the landscape changes. So you always have your phone or your camera with you. In fact, sometimes those events, it's the photographs that you want. It's not so much the paintings you're making. It's
Okay.
actually, you want to get those photos. You want to take those home because you can work on those all year, you know? So
Oh, sweet. So you've been in plein air invitational exhibitions too. I think you mentioned the Zion National Park one.
mhm.
Um, how did you get involved in the plein air circuit in the first place, and how did your invitation come about for that particular event?
Well, I started plein air painting a little over 10 years ago, and I started doing a lot of the local events in Utah. So the ones that anyone can join, you just pay a fee and anyone can participate, you know, and they have prizes and things like that. So I
Hmm.
started doing that for a while, and then I got invited to the Zion Invitational, and that's a juried event. And so I was one of 24 artists that got chosen to do that.
That's great.
And it was really great. I mean, I got invited to that, and then that opened the doors to the Grand Canyon Celebration of Art. So those are the two plein air events that I do now. I pretty much only do those two every year.
Oh, and how long are those?
Zion is about a week,
Okay.
and the Grand Canyon's like 10 days.
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
there for a little while.
and are you camping out when you're there, or do they house you, or what happens with that?
Yeah, they give you places to stay. Zion's great. They put you up in some of those nice hotels in Springdale, which is right outside of the park. And it's really easy to get to the park. It's like 5 minutes away. And the
Nice.
Grand Canyon, there are places to stay in the Grand Canyon too. So you're right in the park and you just get up and drive there and start painting.
Oh,
So,
that's great. So how do you know I mean, so you probably are really familiar with those places now, but in the beginning, like what would you do? Would you like walk around and just find your spot, or
yeah.
what are you looking for when you're looking for a spot to paint?
Well, so when I first got invited to Zion, I I was still actually kind of starting out with plein air painting, so I had like this horrible setup. I was like lugging like a full table around. It was so ridiculous. And I had never painted in the park. I had painted from photos. So when I got
Okay.
there, I was so overwhelmed. I actually kind of panicked for a little while. And I had no clue how to tackle that landscape. It was so new to me. I was looking up
Wow.
at these like rock cliffs and I panicked, but I pulled it
Wow.
together. And I painted throughout the week and I started getting a little bit of confidence painting. And somehow I pulled off some paintings. And so they have a show at the end of the week, and we show all the work that we did.
Okay.
And I actually ended up winning a couple of awards
Oh,
in that show.
wow.
I
Sounds
was
like
like,
you really
and
did pull it together. Were you working on small format or like medium or?
definitely smaller, about
Okay.
11 by 14. That was all I could handle.
Yeah, because it's
And
what you can carry around with you, I guess.
yeah. And you know what? I had such a positive reaction, and everyone actually really embraced that style.
Wow.
And I think that was my breakthrough. It was that show. That was like the turning point of my career. And people started noticing that style and then starting to recognize it. And it was that show. And since then, it's really picked up.
Oh,
So.
oh, very cool. So I'm happy to hear that for you. So, what's your setup when you're painting plein air? Since you were saying like at first you were lugging this big table, what's your setup now? What have you figured it out?
Well, I started off like with the table. I wanted it to be as close to my studio setup as possible, so I was like comfortable with it. But it was just getting too ridiculous carrying around all that gear. Like you can't carry all that plus all your paints and everything. So now I have a good kind of a double tripod system. So one tripod has my palette, the other one has my painting on it,
Okay.
and I can get it all in one backpack now. And so
Oh,
it's a lot
great.
better now. Yeah, I've
That's a
lightened the
lot.
load a little bit.
Yeah, I think, that's a lesson to be learned over and over again with plein air painters. When I first started out too, I was lugging things. I even have like a wagon now that
Yeah, those are handy.
yeah.
And honestly, every event I kind of change it up, and I see what works and doesn't work. So I'm constantly, you know, reevaluating my setup. So
I can imagine. I can imagine. So you're bringing turpentine out there and everything? Are you working with solvents or?
yeah, I bring mineral spirits, but that's only my plein air work. I actually don't use that in the studio.
Oh,
I don't use any solvents in the studio. Um,
okay.
I can't open windows. It's really bad for you, you
Right.
know. So I try to go really natural. I wear gloves and things like that. So I try to be pretty safe with the way I paint.
Oh, that's great that yeah, because if you don't have proper ventilation, it's definitely something to be concerned about. So
Yeah, I need it.
you're not using a lot of mediums or?
I do use a medium. That is probably the one fuming thing I have. It is Gamblin brand, and
Mhm,
they're known to be pretty low toxicity. So
mhm.
I do use that, but no
Oh,
solvent.
cool. So Zion, let's see. Zion is in Utah, right?
Yep.
So, what are some of your other favorite places to paint in Utah? Is like around you?
Well, Zion is number one, definitely. I
Okay,
love that place. And it's not just
okay,
because of the plein air event. I just love that park.
okay.
Um, but there are some places up where I'm at, and it's completely different. It's all mountains and lakes. And if you go there in the fall, there's some great aspen trees, and you get all the colors up that way. And I really like going up there. It's called the Uinta Mountains. And
Okay.
they're really, really high elevation, but really pretty.
Oh, what's that? Do you know what the elevation is up there? I'm curious about that.
Some parts are about 8,000, eight
Okay.
thousand feet. So,
Wow. So you're driving up there and then
mhm.
doing a little bit of hiking and then finding your spot?
Yeah, yeah. And
Cool.
that's usually where I'll go fishing too. They have some great lakes up there with like rainbow trout and stuff. So,
Yeah, that's so great. I very rarely meet a woman fisher, fisher woman. My grandmother did a lot of fishing, so with my grandfather, they traveled around
um,
in their camper and did fishing together. So
oh,
yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I love it. It's fun.
it's a great way to
And if
get
you
out
don't catch
there.
yeah, if you don't catch anything, you're at least around really pretty, you're in a pretty place at least, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's awesome. Yeah, I'm really jealous right now, actually. That sounds great. So, so how do you? I'm curious about this too. Like you're saying, you you take a lot of photos, and I know that lighting can be a little bit hard to figure out from just a photo. So how do you stay true to the lighting, both when you're painting outside because it's always changing, but also the how do you stay true to the lighting when you're using your photo reference in the spec in the studio?
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest parts about plein air painting is the change of light. It's so frustrating, especially like at the Grand Canyon. Like you
Yeah.
could be painting a shadow and then suddenly you look up and it's gone. Like it changes that quickly. So
Wow.
um, a lot of times you either have to do that by memory, or if I really want to make sure it's right, I'll actually go back the next day to that same spot and same time
Okay.
and hope that there aren't a lot of clouds out or something, and hopefully it's the same lighting. But
Right.
with photos, the photos, I try to get what's in the photo, but sometimes I'll kind of bump up the lighting a little bit. Just artistically, I think it might look better. So I might kind of embellish that a little bit. So
Okay. So you know your way around Photoshop to be able to do stuff like that.
well, the funny thing is, the only reason I use Photoshop is just to like crop my photos and
Okay.
color correct,
Okay.
but I don't use that for painting at all. I don't
Okay.
manipulate my photos or anything like that.
Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting to know. Yeah. So you know what you want from the light, but it's so you're working both from memory, but also what works for the painting then, huh?
Yeah, sometimes it's like just because it's in the photo, it might not work in the painting. And so you kind of use your artistic license to,
Right.
edit what you want out and in, but it's all about making the best painting. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. So is there a particular quality? Because like I've lived in all over the place. I've lived in Holland, and I lived in France, and I've been to Paris, and I've lived in different places in the States too. And I always notice that there's a difference in the quality of light. What's unique to the quality of light in Utah where you're living, and also what's the difference between that and at the Grand Canyon too?
yeah, I think there definitely is like a special quality to the light here in Utah and just in the Southwest. I've heard people say it's because the air is so dry that it has a certain quality to it, and you're able to see like far distances because the air is so dry. There's nothing obstructing
Okay.
it, no moisture. But I always tell people there's nothing like a desert sunset. There's something about those colors that just pop in the sky, and you're not going to see that. I mean, I guess I haven't been there, but my dad's from New York, and he's like, you
Okay.
would never see sunsets like that out there.
Wow.
It's also the terrain. So you have like a lot of the desert colors are very natural colors. You can have the reds and the oranges, and they contrast against the sky so well with those complementary colors that it just makes things really pop. And I think that's another thing that really helps with the Southwest area to really make a great painting. Um,
Okay.
so there is a certain look out here, I think.
That's so interesting because you do choose to paint in just these really rich high chroma colors, and in some ways it seems unnatural, but then I guess I have experienced like living in the mountains and also seeing intense colors, but not to the intensity that you use them, and they're so beautiful and gem like, and I'm just really curious about like what's on your palette and how you came to choose to work with such energetic and intense colors, and how how that's influenced your painting.
Yeah, my palette's definitely not a traditional palette. I started off like in school with the traditional 6 colors and white. And then over the years, I just kept adding colors to it. But what also helped was I worked at Blick, and I was just surrounded by like every brand of paint and like every color. So I would go around, looking at them, and I test them out. And so I kind of had that at my fingertips, all these different colors and brands. So I slowly added them to my palette. And so I counted it, my basic palette now, this is my basic palette, is
Okay.
32 colors.
Wow.
And so like some people only paint with like 6 colors. I have like
Right.
7 greens and like 5
Wow.
blues. So,
Wow.
and if you look at my palette, it's really funny because some of the colors don't go together. It's like a blues over here and then all the rest are here. And people are like, why aren't they next to each other? I'm like, well, that's when I added it to my palette. So, but I
Oh,
know where everything is.
right. That's, it's how you organize your palette. If you know that it's there, then you can reach
Yeah.
for it.
And now I know exactly what to reach for. I know where everything is and what they're going to do, but that's years and years of working with that palette. So I mean, you wouldn't want to start off with that palette. That would be really confusing. But
Right.
you just slowly add colors. But I like bright colors. I'm just naturally like that. I get attracted to bright colors, and so that's probably why it's so colorful.
That makes sense. You're very bright and cheerful too, so that makes sense. So can you like name your 5 greens that are on your palette? I'm curious. Do you
Yeah,
have
like
like a chrome green? Do you have a chrome green or a sap green?
I do have a sap green. Like I can actually picture my palette now. So, and I have it kind of laid out all on the top. So it starts off with an olive green in Gamblin, and then another olive green in Windsor Newton, because they're completely different greens depending on the brand.
Oh
Then
wow.
I have a green gold, a yellow green, sap green, greenish umber, and permanent yellow green. So
Oh wow.
like
So many different.
so many, and they're all different, but I know what which one I need, and
Right.
they're all different looking.
But you know what you need for certain effects and things like that. Oh,
Yep.
that's very cool. I have some of those colors, but some of them I don't.
Yeah, and
So
they're
I
all
could try
different
them out.
brands. They're all different brands too. So some of the colors they change throughout the brand too.
Right. Yeah, I know. Different companies have different mixes that they and yeah. I've sometimes I get a cobalt green, which I really like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's totally different from brand to brand. I mean, even the name is different, but it's still the same kind of
Yep.
effect. But some of them have more blue, and some of them have more green. And
Yep.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So
why working at Blick helped because I could try them out and like
that's such a great point and such a great advantage that you could try out different products and different paints and have that
yeah.
at your fingertips to experiment with without having to uh, pass on a chunk of change to
Yeah.
in materials. So
Yep.
that's awesome. That's really great. And so what's like your favorite tool in the studio? Are you using a palette knife at all? Do you have like a favorite brush?
Um, all my brushes are brights, so they're the shorter flats, and they're all like nylon, so they're really soft. So I need that for blending. But the
Okay.
only round I use is the one I sign my paintings with.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it seems like everybody's got their own like favorite thing that they go for, what kind of brush they go for, or what kind of special tool. So it's always
Yeah.
interesting to me to see what people decide to use. And it's something I'm also noticing just looking at the painting behind you. What's the painting called right now that I'm looking at? What's the name of that painting?
You know what? I actually just finished it, so it doesn't have a
Oh,
title yet.
oh,
Yeah,
cool.
but it is the Grand Canyon. Yeah.
God, that's stunning. It's beautiful. I'm noticing like there's a lot of different kinds of edges. Are you like really focusing on like how to push and pull those edges back and forth?
Yeah, that's how my style kind of first started was I started off like really photorealistic, like copying everything. But that was from high school because like in high school, everyone kind of gauged good art by if it looked right, like if it looked correct. So
Right?
I was so focused on getting it correct. But throughout college, I started experimenting more and I really got fascinated with breaking up edges. And so I
Okay.
was like, how can you break up an edge but still have your eye kind of fill in that information? So I was kind of just playing around with that, and then it just ended up being horizontal and vertical lines.
Right.
For a while I got kind of obsessed with it where every edge was broken, and then I kind of pulled it back trying to get more vertical lines. And so now I think I have a good balance between it's still traditional but still kind of modern looking, and I'm not so obsessed with the squares, but they're still there.
Okay.
So, and it's been years of going back and forth with that. And even color, I got crazy with colors like blue trees and everything. And then I reined I reined that in a little bit too. So now I'm a little more natural colors, but they're still super bright though.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's something that I really love about your work too, not just the intensity of the color, but like this intense energetic pulse that you have in it, just by like the kind of cubist style that you're using, and the lines and the shapes that you incorporate, that are like geometric forms within the more organic landscape. And it kind of reminds me, like I was saying, of Cubism and also Italian Futurism. Are there specific artists or movements that you were influenced by when you were developing this style?
It not really. I wasn't really looking at any of that. It was just purely experimenting.
Okay.
The artists that influenced me in painting, I mean, they're nothing like my paintings at all. So it's kind of like, how does that relate? But a lot of it's the lighting to me. And that would be like Albert Bierstadt and John Singer Sargent.
Mm-hmm.
The lighting quality, that's what I'm trying to get in my paintings too. I want those sweet spots of lighting because that's what's interesting. I think that's what makes a great landscape painter.
So that's interesting, because it seems like, yeah, it does seem like there's like this marriage between light and movement that's going on in your work. Like nothing ever seems to be standing still. And I'm wondering what makes you want to embed your paintings with that like feeling of movement and intensity?
Yeah, well, I think the way I paint too, because I blend out a lot of the colors or a lot of the brush strokes, and it kind of gives that movement to the painting. And I want that. I don't like when you look outside, you look at a landscape, it is moving. It's not just a picture standing still. It's not a still life. And I don't want people to look at it and be like, oh, another landscape. Why not just take a photo of it then? I want it to have a life. I want it to move, and I want people to experience it the way I saw it, because when I saw it, it was live and it was moving. So I don't want it to just be just another picture,
Right. And you're moving in it too. So it's both the moving landscape, but also your personal experience in the landscape. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just had this show at Abend Gallery at No Ordinary World, the solo show. So how did that show come about, and how did you come up with that particular title?
So they asked me if I wanted to do a solo show about 2 years ago. So this has been in the works for about 2 years.
Okay.
So I was planning, okay, I'm gonna have a solo show in 2020. And so I worked really hard getting all the paintings together, and unfortunately we didn't even have an opening.
How many pieces were in that show?
I had 11 pieces.
Okay. And you were working in a larger format than you usually do, right? So what's the difference in sizes what do you usually work in, and what did you do for that show, and what were the challenges for you working in that larger format?
Yeah, I usually my bigger paintings are about 24 by 36, maybe 24 by 40, around there, and smaller. I usually don't do really big pieces like what I did for Abend. Some of those are like 36 by 60. But I know I wanted to give them some bigger works because they were asking for bigger pieces. And bigger sizes, I think, have more of an impact too. When you walk into a show, it's nice to see a large painting there. And in person, you can also see more of the brush strokes. It's just more impressive, I think.
Right. Just the thing, I think of Bierstadt, who you admire as well, how you enter into those landscapes. You're literally inside the painting when you're looking at it.
Yeah, it's like you're surrounded by it. You want to be like engulfed in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I usually don't work too big. Last year, I was having a lot of problems with my hand and my
Oh.
wrist and a lot
Oh.
of pain. It was to the point where I couldn't really hold my brushes, and it got
Oh.
pretty bad. So I got that checked out. I don't need surgery or anything like that. It was just purely overuse and just
Okay.
inflamed. So now I've been able to, take care of it. And I just kind of, I've had to change a lot of things, like how I paint, things like that. So it's just those larger works are just so physically demanding, and there's
Sure.
so much blending. I mean, I blend, and I think that's really what kills my arms, my back and stuff. So it's
Right.
mostly physical. That's why I don't do such big pieces. And I also work on MDF board, so it's really heavy to get
Oh.
off of the easels and stuff like that. So
Right.
that's why I don't do. Yeah, it's harder to do bigger paintings for me.
Well, you probably are familiar with Artifacts, who Abend
Hmm.
just does some work with. I think some of their
Yeah.
pieces, their panels are probably a lot lighter.
Yeah, I was gonna look into those. They gave me some little 5x5 samples, and they seem kind of light, and they stay flat, which is what you want. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, they're really good with their materials and everything. I can only say good things about them. I've only just gotten to know them as well, and I'm also doing the 5x5. So,
oh,
um,
nice. You haven't
yeah.
tried them yet.
Well, I like them, and I haven't taken them out in the field, but definitely for moving stuff around, and also for framing. It's going to be definitely a lighter thing for framing it as well. I think it's definitely worth it, and they're really concerned about the quality of their materials. So,
Oh,
and
nice.
they work great with artists.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, because it's just simple things like that, like getting it off the easel. It's just so heavy, but if I could lighten it up, just make my life easier, you know.
Yeah, I totally, totally understand. I mean, being an artist is such a physical job. So how's it
Yeah,
been?
so
How's it been having the show online and versus in real life? And also, like, how has it been for you getting in the studio and everything during the pandemic?
for me, for me personally, what's funny is it actually hasn't really affected my studio life or painting at all. The only thing that is affected is that the galleries are closed.
Right,
My daily routine is exactly the same. I still go to my studio. I'm just by myself, so I'm still distancing.
right.
um, and I've just been working every day ever since. And so it, it's nice to not have my routine broken up like that. I want to stay busy. And when I'm in the studio painting, I kind of actually forget what's going on in the world, which is really nice, actually. It's nice to
Yeah.
just, step back from that and not constantly hear it all the time. So,
No, for
um,
sure. I think a lot of us have COVID fatigue. It's kind of overwhelming. So to be able to step back from that, that's great if you can do that.
yeah, yeah, and it's nice. I can just stay busy. And honestly, it's given me the time to just build up my inventory and build up inventory for my galleries too. And I haven't had time to do that. So I'm finally like giving multiple pieces to the galleries to sit on for a while. And, but I don't have the deadlines looming over me. So it's kind of more relaxed actually. So it's nice
Right.
I've just been catching up on paintings, and it's actually, it's actually been kind of good.
Oh, that's great. That's great that you've had the time to do that. That's nice to, I think a lot of people are looking to have that, taking advantage of the break, in a way.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
great. So are you painting outside, or are you just in the studio? And if you are painting outside, how do you manage that with like the social distancing?
Pretty much just the studio. I haven't been outside painting yet. Here, if you're going to paint outside, there's so much space that you might not ever run into anyone. Um, but I'm mostly just working on studio work right now.
Is it out of your imagination that you're creating these geometric shapes, or how are you deriving that the way you do that, like the way you break them up into the more geometric shapes and the cubism versus I know I've talked about that a little bit, but like
Yeah.
how do you make that happen? Is it just something in your head that you're inventing, or do you play around with drawing and trying to figure out how to make that work?
And people ask, they're like, do I see things in pixels? And I'm like, no, I don't see, I don't
Right.
see it like that. But what I do see is I simplify everything. So I can look at something, let's say like a tree, and I simplify them, the colors and the shapes into these strokes.
Okay.
And so I feel like I'm actually simplifying the painting. Some people think it's actually harder and more detailed. But for me, like I can do like a cliff, like a red rock cliff in one stroke, where other people are trying to get all the details, but I'm just simplifying it with one line.
Okay.
So to me, I see it as I'm breaking it down into simple shapes and colors, and they happen to be horizontal and vertical lines.
Okay. Interesting. Do you ever throw like a diagonal in there just to shake things up?
Yeah, and that's where I'm still developing that and going back and forth and trying to balance like a regular traditional line work with my style. So it's still kind of this impressionist modern look. Like I said, I got pretty obsessed with the horizontal vertical lines for a while. Then it was like, okay, we got to get some of those diagonals in. We got to, it can't all be like that. And so that's where I'm always kind of developing that too.
Okay, cool. So you're continually processing and coming up with new ways to paint. That's interesting.
Oh, well, one thing with technology too is it's kind of interesting because I found that like the younger generation seems to gravitate toward my work. Like if I'm at an event, they like to see what I'm painting instead of, they go to the other artists, but they really get attracted to my work. And at first I was like, is it because of the bright colors or the style is really different? It's not so traditional. But I thought maybe it's because they can actually relate to it because it looks like their video games and their phones and all that. And maybe they actually have some kind of connection to that, And I always find that's kind of interesting.
No, that makes sense because they almost feel like animation. It almost feels like animation derived. So that's kind of interesting. You don't have any background in animation at all.
I don't. No. I mean, I like to do like draw little characters and stuff, but no, not really.
Yeah.
But it's funny because that's the stuff I follow on Instagram, though. People think I follow all these painters, but it's mostly illustrations and concept art. That's what I follow on Instagram.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, what you experience as an artist always comes back into your work. So that's interesting that that's what you're taking in. Maybe that's coming back out in your work somehow.
Yeah. And I find a lot of that work has the qualities that I look for. So they have that great lighting. Like a lot of the concept art is it's actually for video games and movies and things like that. And so they have that really dramatic lighting and stuff like that. But I guess maybe I do use that in my work too. And that's why I get attracted to that. That's why I follow them,
Right. Very interesting. It's funny when you talk, sometimes when you talk about your work, you start to make these connections because
I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's why that happens. Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
That's interesting.
Now that I say it out loud.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. So one other thing I wanted to ask you real quick is you speak about the sacredness of a place, and I was wondering what you mean by that. Like, what is landscape for you? Like, besides just the enjoyment of going out and being outdoors, what is it for you? It's like an abstract idea.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm a person that I like to kind of be away from people. I'm not very social. If I go out into a landscape, I want to be by myself. I don't want to see other people, things like that. And so a lot of the landscapes, especially like in Utah, we have a lot of national parks and state parks, and I want those places to be preserved. I've been here almost my whole life, and I've seen it where no one's around. There are no people. Like, let's say Zion National Park. That's when it was a smaller park. It wasn't touristy. It wasn't a lot of people. And I've seen it grow into this really overpopulated, overused place. And it kind of makes me sad to see it like that.
Wow.
So these places to me are special because I saw it before it was taken over by people, you know, and
Yeah.
I want these places preserved. You know, like Zion, everyone who works there and lives there, they all have preservation on their mind. It's all about preserving the land because they're like that. They enjoy that and they don't want to see it ruined. And
Right.
they want to keep it great for generations to come. And
Right.
we have to do that. Otherwise, everything's going to get destroyed. You know, everything's going to get taken over.
Right.
So for me, landscapes, you know, it's a place that I can go to. I want to be away from people and it's like my happy place. And a lot of my landscapes, besides like one painting in my No Ordinary World show,
Mm-hmm.
I don't add human features. There are telephone poles in only one painting, and I rarely do that. I
Yeah,
try
I
not.
noticed that there's
There's
no
no
human beings or other.
no buildings, nothing like that. It just happened to be that one painting, and that is so rare for me to do. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that. I like to edit out all the trace of humans in there. I just want it to purely be about the landscape.
Okay. Wonderful. That's wonderful. That's such a great note to leave this on. I think that it's great to hear how much you care about the landscape and how much it means to you, as well as just like creating these beautiful paintings.